Well, fair to say it's been a hell of a year for a lot of employees who haven't spent much time seeing each other than virtually via Zoom. And now, as Christmas party season kicks in, the do's, the don'ts, and of course, the hilarious stories from Christmas parties that can end careers or make or break friendships or break relationships as well. Let's bring in Karen Gately from Corporate Dojo, of course, the sensei there. Sometimes martial arts skills are needed at these sorts of parties.
Yes, I can actually say that I have been in a situation where things were getting a bit heated and I needed to step forward and separate the parties in that moment.
Did you knock someone out?
No, no. Hopefully, one of the things that you learn as a martial artist and a black belt is you don't necessarily have to hit people as the first step.
Yeah.
But certainly, just waking people up to the fact that we're actually still at a work function here,
And that's the thing, isn't it? Like we've seen a lot of, and this year will be quite interesting because it might be the first time that people have seen each other in quite some time. And then on top of that, the boundaries this year, I feel, are really blurred between work and life because work has come home.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's entirely right. What I'm anticipating, we're busy most Januaries fielding calls around the Christmas party and, what's gone down and now how we respond. But given the year that we've just had, we're all kind of bracing ourselves as a team that this could be a doozy of a year because I think, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to come together in person. People have been, as you pointed out, certainly in Victoria, spending a lot of time in their homes rather than being able to get out there. So, I think that there's going to be a lot of people letting their hair down and having a good time. And Christmas parties are a really important part of the organisation's culture and just bringing the team together to celebrate, particularly after such a tough year. But clearly, as employers, we need to be really mindful that things can get out of hand and can obviously lead to challenges.
Well, what is it when it comes to whose responsibility it is? So let's talk about you've hired a venue, perhaps it might be a pub or whatever. You've got the team all there and then something happens. Obviously, it's not ideal from an employer's perspective, but is the employer responsible?
Yes. This is probably the one of the most important things employers need to understand is that when you actually book the venue and ask your team to all gather there, what you've done is just literally move the workplace. So in the eyes of the law, you're still at work because it's a workplace venue. So all of the duty of care and the obligations continue with the employer. So one of the really important strategies that we always recommend is that when you've had that kind of event, that you're very clear about when it's over, that you're really clear about, okay, this is the end of the work party, because obviously a lot of people will then continue on and go and do their own things into the night if it's a nighttime event. And, you need to have demonstrated that you've taken all reasonable steps to make sure people are safe. So some employers will go as far as offering cab rides or vouchers home to make sure that if there is alcohol especially involved, that people are transported home. But we're just going to be really clear, what is the party and what is your own time and your own activities and decisions.
And also managers find themselves in difficult positions at parties where people have had a few drinks. I mean, I attended a work party once where a senior manager, towards the end of the party, was getting extremely intoxicated, heading towards the boss of the company to get a few things off his chest. I mean,
yes.
I'm just remembering it very, very fondly, standing there and knowing that something disastrous is about to happen. But I guess my point is that when you're a manager, you are very vulnerable at these sorts of events.
Absolutely. What I always say to leaders is you need to remember that you're on duty, and whilst you don't have to avoid alcohol altogether, you do need to keep it tidy. You need to keep it in a place where A, you're leading by example, but B, that you're actually in a position to make sure everybody else is okay and everybody else is looked after. So again, I've seen lots of horror stories. I helped a CEO through a situation where that exact thing had happened. One of his 2IC, if you'd like, just got completely intoxicated and then proceeded to sexually harass half the staff. It was clearly an extreme example of the kinds of behaviours.
And what happens in that situation? Is it something where, I mean, the world has changed, obviously, very much over the past 10 years. You think about, at the start of my career, there were a lot of people hooking up within workplaces and things like that as well. And that culture is very, very different these days. Before Christmas parties, big corporations send out emails, essentially almost like a sign saying it's a wet floor, don't trip, as a way to try and protect themselves legally. What
Yeah.
do workplaces need to do about these things, HR managers, etc., before the Christmas party to remind everybody to be careful? And when you're there, you talk about managers being on duty and things. Is it also their responsibility to be saying to people, you've had a bit too much to drink, maybe it's time to
Yeah.
go home?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things employers need to do before the party is to remind everyone we don't need to come across in a overly serious or stiff way, but we do need to remind everyone, we're going to be at a work function. It's really important that we're all remembering that our policies go with us. So, appropriate workplace conduct rules still apply at the venue. And then again, making sure that managers are educated about what are some of the risks, what are some of the things that go wrong at Christmas parties, and how do we make sure that we're actually safeguarding against those. So clearly, when there's alcohol involved, I've seen all sorts of things like people deciding dancing on the bar is a great idea. Yeah, up until a point someone actually slips off and cracks their head open, So again, sometimes it can feel like we're being the party pooper. We've just got to actually keep the function happening in a way that reduces the risk or minimises the risk that something's going to happen, and
Yeah.
God forbid, people
I
actually
think of
lose
the
their.
people that we talk to here at Ticker, a lot of our audience are people who are startups and medium-sized business managers, etc. And there's a transition, isn't there? And I mean, I'm feeling it here at Ticker, obviously, where it starts off and it's very much like a family. And as you grow, people's expectations, it's not necessarily you changing, it's how people perceive the company. And of course, you always have to protect yourself from the one or two bad apples.
Yeah.
And therefore, you realize, and I've been in companies before where management will say, look, we can no longer attend after this point. We have to go home. You mentioned earlier about when the work party ends and people head to the bar and it's no longer a work event. The senior management team generally disperse at that stage, might go somewhere else, but they just don't want to be around when, the younger staff or whomever it might be start to really party.
Exactly right. I think, again, obviously, just in terms of maintaining that credibility and your ability to lead by example the next week, all of those reasons, but also, as we've been saying, that the risk factors. Again, I saw another incident where the bar had been closed, the party was over, and it was actually a senior manager that insisted with the venue staff that they reopen the bar and proceeded to give some of the staff more alcohol. Well, the sad reality is one of those people ended up being hurt that night because they were so intoxicated, and that did come back on the employer. It was very clear that the employer in that case hadn't taken reasonable steps to make sure that people are safe. So if we think about if we're a bar owner, right, we've got obligations around responsible serving of alcohol and, again, refusing service if we think people are too intoxicated. So, as a minimum, those standards also apply if we're a leader that's putting on staff function.
All right, we'll leave it there for this week. Karen Gately, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for this week's edition of Ticker Work. You can catch it on the app or the website. Subscribe and be careful out there at those Christmas parties. We'll see you soon.